Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Lift Shit Get Banged podcast. You've got a solo episode with myself, Ben, today, as the wonderful Sophia has already done a brilliant job doing a solo episode herself a couple of weeks ago. I am very fittingly sat in the car outside of the gym, very fittingly given what I'm going to talk about. Is that a word? Fittingly? And I'm going to do my best to stay very still because I am wearing a jacket that is rather noisy and it is a little bit too cold to take it off as it is early in the morning. So I do apologise if there is any background noise. I know Sophia's going to try and work her magic in the edit to get my voice nice and crisp. But anyway, today we are going to piggyback off of Sophia's episode where she talked about mental health and food and talk about our relationship with exercise and mental health. And I think a bit of an insight into my relationship with exercise and how it's played a role in my mental health over the years, in the hopes that it is relatable to even one person. So my early relationship with exercise was definitely sport. When I was about 4 years old, I started playing football. I played football from the age of 4 to 18. I then went and played rugby for a couple of years, which I thoroughly enjoyed and wish that I'd actually started playing it a lot earlier. But when I started playing rugby, I very quickly realised that I was going to need to be a little bit bigger and stronger. And as I think I was 16 playing adult rugby. So I was put out on the wing and I was getting bounced around a little bit by big scary grown men. So I wanted to get a little bit bigger and stronger, and that was my entry into the gym. And I very, very quickly absolutely fell in love with it. It wasn't instant. I spent a good couple of years just kind of walking around the gym floor, looking at the machines, thinking, what on earth does that do? And feeling like I didn't have a clue. And I took to YouTube. I took to podcasts, a bit like you guys are doing, listening to this, and started to pick up a few things that just made it feel like I went into the gym with an idea of what I was going to do that day. And I did from that point on very quickly fall in love with like a bodybuilding style of training. I loved gaining muscle, gaining strength, and fast forward 2 or 3 years into my early 20s, and it really was a big part of my identity. And when you start to really get into training and your body starts to change shape, you start to get feedback on that from others. And I became the guy that went to the gym, and I became the guy that that was muscular and that was stronger than most of my friends. And again, it is something that I really latched onto, and it became such a big part of who I felt I was. And the reason why that's important is fast forward another 2 or 3 years, and I was no longer quite enjoying the gym as much as I did when I first got into it. It was starting to become a little bit more of a chore. And then fast forward another year or two from there, so that it was kind of a gradual process. My daughter was born, and we got a puppy, and we decided to make our life very challenging by doing both of those things very close together. And I found myself not training, and I found myself really struggling to get myself into the gym. And obviously by that point I was a personal trainer, I was an online coach, and my identity then became, I should be doing what I preach to my clients. I should be exercising. I should enjoy it. Like, what's going on? And to go from absolutely loving the gym and it being what consumed most of my spare time, being my main hobby, being such a big part of my identity and who I felt I was, to then really struggling to just want to step foot in the gym in any capacity, was really confusing and really conflicting, I think it would be the right word. And obviously it wasn't overnight. I had to go through a period of experiencing that, kind of just, going through periods of trying to get myself in the gym, periods where I did train quite consistently, periods where I didn't train quite consistently. And having that kind of conflict with my identity of, I'm a PT, I'm a coach, what's going on? I need to get a hold of this. To then, now today, having a very different relationship with exercise. It's a relationship where I don't love it, and I had to accept that I don't absolutely adore training anymore, but I do it because of how important it is for my physical health, my mental health, and now in a very funny roundabout way, I am doing what I preach to clients. I'm getting myself in the gym even when I no longer feel like that person that absolutely loves the gym, and I no longer attach parts of my identity to being somebody who goes to the gym and somebody who is super muscular and super strong. And in a funny roundabout way, it's made me a better coach, because I now, I couldn't relate to my clients when the gym was all I could think about, and I couldn't wait to get into the gym in the evening after a full day of labouring back in, my late teens, when I was working summer jobs in between uni. I'd go and do 9-10 hours of a labouring job and then be in the gym at 6:30 at night and absolutely love it. And that is obviously no longer the case. So having learned and practiced the skills to get myself in the gym, even when I really don't feel like it, to be able to train consistently when I really would rather be doing other things, in terms of, or even feeling like I should be doing other things like work responsibilities, dad responsibilities, has absolutely made me a better coach. And it's now given me the ability to relate to my clients that do struggle to get into the gym much, much better. And the bit that I think is going to be super relevant and hopefully going to be helpful on this podcast is how I did that, how I went through that journey of finding it effortless to get into the gym to now having to really give myself a push and give myself a nudge. And the bit that's hopefully going to be helpful from this is how I did that and why I do that. And you might feel like you're in a similar position to me, and you did love the gym and now you're trying to get back into it and trying to get that love back. You might be just starting the gym, which can obviously feel similar, because if you're starting for the first time or you feel like you're starting over, how we go about that is going to be very, very similar. And I think the kind of brutal truth of it is that we need to move our body. We don't really have a choice. And there is obviously going to be circumstances where we can't exercise, or we can't exercise in conventional ways. Injury, illness, there's going to be all sorts of circumstances, and obviously we're not talking about that. But we really owe it to ourselves to exercise, because if we don't, we are missing out on how it can make our brain feel, as well as how it can make our body feel. If we strength train in some capacity, we're going to increase our bone density. We're going to increase the elasticity and strength of our ligaments and tendons. And that might sound like, that might not sound particularly relatable, but what does sound relatable is when our foot goes flying out underneath us in the shower and we nearly end up Peter Griffin style, flat on our back, arm folded underneath us. If we've been hammering our split squats in the gym that us coaches love to give our clients, we might just pick ourselves up and carry on with our day. If we've been sedentary for the last 5 years and we slip in that same fashion, we're very likely we're going to tear an ACL, pop a hamstring, all sorts. So it really is about protecting our body as we age, especially. We're also going to grow some muscle mass, we're going to gain some strength, which can allow us to do some pretty cool shit. It can allow us to do some really cool activities, and it can allow us to feel much more confident and feel like our body is much more competent as we do fun stuff. And I think the bit that was important for me is I no longer had a thing that I was moving towards. I no longer had that drive and that passion for wanting to have loads of muscle, for wanting to be super strong. It no longer felt like it was a really key part of my identity. Other parts of my life felt more important. I was pouring everything into my business during that transition away from loving training. I was pouring everything into being a good husband, a good dad, a good dog dad. And what I found became true for me was my motivation to train became about moving away from not wanting to feel fragile, not wanting to feel like I was only ever one slip in the shower away from a torn hamstring. And that kind of, although it can seem a little bit brutal, that reality of I have to exercise. I owe it to myself to move my body in some way so that I don't feel fragile and don't really lack confidence in my body, not from a visual perspective, from a not feeling confident in what my body can do and feeling like my body will let me down in situations where I need it. And again, speaking of being a dad and a dog dad, being able to run around and being able to lift my daughter up and throw her up in the air, I didn't want to not be in a position to be able to do that stuff. So my motivation to get in the gym really became about how I didn't want to feel, not chasing some really big, cool, exciting goal like I had in the past. Exercising consistently is going to release endorphins. It's going to make us feel good. It's going to help us de-stress. It's largely what's responsible for that feeling of I didn't feel good before the gym, but I felt great walking out of the gym, that we talk to clients about all the time. But also, and I think arguably more importantly, we live in a world now where it is so easy to be very dopamine deficient, and dopamine being the thing that is driving us to do difficult things that are rewarding. We can get our dopamine from other much more fun, much more accessible sources that our brains don't find it as appealing to push ourselves to go and do difficult things, because we can get it artificially through other means. So being able to say, I need to exercise because I don't want to feel like X, because moving away from how we want to feel rather than necessarily towards a big shiny goal. Every session that we do is going to build our ability to do difficult stuff. And it doesn't have to be all David Goggins-y. It really doesn't. It doesn't have to mean that we're going to wake up and decide to go run a marathon to prove to ourselves that we can do hard things. But those little things that we do each day, those little micro decisions, that decision to just get in the gym for 2 minutes, to just go and put our gym shoes on. And if we still don't feel like it, we don't have to go. But those little nudges, those little decisions to just push ourselves towards doing the thing is going to help us build dopamine. And it's going to make us feel really good. And it's also going to be incredibly rewarding, because we likely will, once we get really stuck into the process, start to feel like we are moving towards something. And it's once we get away from feeling stuck and feeling like we're somebody who can't consistently exercise, can't push ourselves to get into the gym, and start to move towards somebody who can. And there we go. There's another identity shift. We move from somebody who can't give themselves that push to exercise to somebody who can. And that's a really, really cool position to be in. And there are specific, tools and habits that we practice with clients, but it's not necessarily about that. Like I mentioned, the 2-minute rule of bargaining with ourselves to just do the first 2 minutes of the thing. Whether it's we bargain with ourselves that we're going to go and do the first exercise, or whether it's that we bargain with ourselves that we're going to go and get changed into our gym clothes. If we really don't feel like it, we don't have to go, but we're just starting that process. And once we start, we're more likely to continue. But this isn't so much about the tools and the habits and the things that are going to get us to make those changes. It quite often is about being honest with ourselves, and that conversation I had to have with myself of, it's okay for me to not absolutely love the gym anymore. My life is totally different now at 28, nearly 29, with lots of grey hairs to show for it. It's okay for me to not love the gym in the same way that I did in my early 20s, because my life is now so different, and there's so many other factors that play into that. And I have so much more responsibility than I did in my early 20s, where of an evening, all I had to think about was me, and how it's okay to not have that be a part of your identity. We don't have to love the gym. We don't have to be that person that is known for being super muscular, super strong, super into the gym. But we don't want to know how it feels to not exercise. We don't want to know how it feels for our body and our brain to be very sedentary, because it doesn't feel good for anyone. And that is our motivation for wanting to get ourselves into the gym. And it might look completely differently. What you're doing in the gym is going to look completely differently, or what you're doing with your exercise is going to be totally differently. And I didn't even go into that, because I didn't want this to be a half an hour episode. But it doesn't have to be that big shiny thing that we're moving towards. It can be, what are we moving away from? How do we not want to feel? So I hope this was relatable and somewhat helpful to even one person. And don't worry, you'll have Sophia back with myself next week, and I will look forward to catching up with you guys then.